to adjourn the public hearing. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beal. All those in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned. Okay, good evening once again, everyone, and welcome to the May 7th regular meeting of Council. I want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish Nations. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes of the special council meeting held April 9th, 2018. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Burden. Are there any errors or omissions? Councillor Beal.
Okay, just to clarify, this is for the minutes of the April 16th council meeting?
I have April 9th on.
Oh, April 9th, okay, yeah.
Beal.
And again, I must ask, is this for the parcel tax roll review or is this for the council meeting?
It's the parcel tax review panel meeting held April 16th.
Oh, okay, so that would be separate from the other meeting, correct? Okay.
All those in favor? Thank you, that is carried. Minutes of the council meeting held April 16th, which is the minutes of council on April 16th. I need a mover and a seconder. You opposed? Okay. Have you noted that, staff? Okay, so now the minutes of the council meeting held April 16th, 2018 be adopted. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any errors or omissions? Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to note that the new business item, which had to do with the plastic ban, the potential ban on plastic bags, that we actually did have one opposed.
Okay.
So that wasn't noted.
Okay.
If that could be correction.
Well, staff noted that? Okay. All those in favor after the notation? Thank you. That is carried. And finally, the minutes of the special council meeting held April 19th. I need a mover and a seconder for the motion. Would they be accepted? Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Beal. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Next, members of council, I need an approval of the agenda. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beal. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. We're moving on to new business. I'm going to go around the table. I'm going to start off with Councillor Burden. New business.
Doesn't come close enough. Now I've done it. There we go. Had the pleasure of attending the BC Parks and Rec Symposium last week as part of my role on the RDN Parks and Rec Commission. Lots of great information, new concepts and ideas in terms of facility management and those kinds of things. And also attended the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region meeting, roundtable meeting on Friday, where it was officially announced that the 1,000 trees that Parksville planted was recognized and was gratefully accepted by Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region. So good news from both of those.
And we'll be having a ceremony to that effect at some point in time, I believe.
Yeah, probably arranged by the Biosphere after the federal government gives them some details.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have any new business.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'd just like to mention that this Wednesday, lots of people here, so note this if you can, this Wednesday, May 9th, there's an opportunity to walk with a dock maybe not your doc, but a doc, walk with your doctor, and come down to the main gazebo in the community park at 4 p.m. I attended last year. It was a great opportunity, and there were physiotherapists on hand, hopefully again this year as well, with some nice warm-up exercises and a chance to get out in the fresh air down at the beach.
Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you, Worship. We did go to AVICC. Others have mentioned that. Last Friday, yourself and Councillor Salter and I sat down with the auditor, and we did that. I think that's coming up later in the agenda as well. My email address works. I didn't think it did for the first 3 years I was in office, but it works now because I'm getting an awful lot of emails. People are starting to contact me, so I've been busy meeting with different people in the community and communicating with them and things like that. So I'm looking forward to the presentation later tonight and the debate that may follow.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I attended Earth Day celebrations with Councillor Beale of some of the unveiling of the new viewing station, and that in Qualicum Beach. That was a joint, well, with many, many partners and that, but the City of Parksville is a partner as well. It was educational and a beautiful day, so it was really quite rewarding to be there. Yesterday, on Sunday, I also had the privilege of being at the Legion and laying a wreath on behalf of the city and mayors in regards to the Battle of the Atlantic. Councillor Oates was in attendance, as well as many other people in the community, and our children are really amazing. We had quite a few Navy cadets in attendance, reading out different freighters and things that had been lost, and the amount of stats and that. So it's rewarding to have that history passed down to our young ones, because it's there's very few people left from that day. So thank you.
Thank you. And before I give my items, I'd just like to acknowledge that Councillor Salter had a big loss in her life, and we all share your loss. Very sorry about that. Okay, this week is recognized as Emergency Preparedness Week. The City of Parksville, Town of Qualicum Beach, and the RDN Emergency Program Coordinators will be available to ask questions about being better prepared. Locations will be in Parksville, Qualicum Beach, Bowser, Lanceville, Cedar, and Gabriola. As you may have read in the paper, Stage 2 watering results are now in place through September, unless otherwise advised by the city. Sprinkling can only occur on even days for even-numbered houses and on odd days for odd-numbered houses, and is permitted for a maximum of 2 hours between 7 and 10 a.m. in the morning or 7 and 10 p.m. at night. The next event for the Parks and Trails and Open Spaces Master Plan will be held on Saturday, June the 9th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Foster Park, located on Sanderson Road, Parksville. In partnership with the Friends of Foster Park, the Spring Mini Parks event will feature games, food, and information about the Master Plan project. I would hope that many people can attend that. Information about all these items can be found on the city's website and Facebook page. So moving along, we have one delegation tonight, and it's very important that we all pay attention to what this delegation is going to present to us. It's presented by the Island Crisis Care Society and BC Housing regarding the zoning amendment application at 222 Corfield Street South to facilitate a supportive housing facility. With us tonight are Violet Hayes from the Island Crisis Care Society, Malcolm McNaughton, and Craig Crawford from BC Housing. Would you come to the microphone, please? Give us your presentation.
Okay, good evening, Your Worship, councillors and staff. Okay. Yeah. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors and staff. I'm aware this evening of a huge weight on my shoulders, and especially yours as you make this important decision. Sure. As I think of the Oceanside people who are desperate to have a safe home, I'm in awe of what this decision could mean for them. For seniors that we know who are living in moldy, leaking trailers, some without water or electricity. For those living in their vehicles and barely hanging on. For young people who have aged out of care or have escaped a violent family and are now couch surfing. I especially think of one person I know who is terminally ill and without a home. Yes, this process is not one to be taken lightly. And I want to share something taken from the Parksville Official Community Plan. On page 146, it says, providing a range of housing options, including affordable housing, is an important component of a complete community. Many people agree that a supportive, caring community welcomes people of all ages, abilities, and socioeconomic backgrounds. There are 4 groups in particular that find it a challenge to meet their housing needs. Income assistance recipients, low-income wage earners, retirees, and families with moderate income levels. For many people, the concept of owning a home is way beyond reach, and finding safe, suitable, and appropriate rental housing is a primary goal. And then from page 147, Parksville has fewer housing resources for those people suffering from mental illness or disabilities. The city is open to exploring partnerships to fill this gap in the community. So I'd like to thank you all for your innovation in finding a way to purchase the property on Corfield Street, and for the way that you were able to work in partnership, as your plan calls for you to do, with the Regional District of Nanaimo and with the town of Qualicum Beach. Housing is a human right, and the Government of Canada, through the National Housing Strategy, has released a discussion paper called A Human Rights-Based Approach to Housing. In it, it says that the housing needs of people who are homeless must be a priority. Inclusiveness means, first of all, helping people living at the margins of our society. Now, our goal at ICCS is to see people that we work with make healthy life choices. And this project fits in line with the Housing First strategy that we have been using for 3 years in Oceanside through the Oceanside Task Force. I'd like to read an article taken from the Guardian newspaper in England on April 12th of this year. It says, skeptics will argue that giving homes to homeless people is a recipe for disaster. Aren't we just subsidizing addiction? Won't we end up with huge bills when it all goes wrong? Don't people need an incentive to get their lives back on track and engage in services? Actually, no. The evidence from Finland, as well as numerous other pilot schemes across the world, shows that the opposite is true. When people are given homes, homelessness is radically reduced. Engagement in support services goes up, and recovery rates from addictions are comparable to a treatment-first approach. Even more impressive is that there is an overall savings for the government, as people's use of emergency health services and the criminal justice system is lessened. So tonight, I want to share with you 4 points, and Craig is going to help me. So the first one is the types of people that we will be housing in this building. And anyone who wants to apply to live at Corfield will be able to apply, and a vulnerability assessment tool will be used. It will be completed by the outreach workers who are already working with the people that are out there. And currently that team includes our staff, the SOS, Mental Health and Substance Use, and Canadian Mental Health Association, and Forward House. We've had this collaborative team that's been working, and we continue to do that and plan to do that with the new program. There are many reasons that people might need this support that we talk about. And People are often talking about addiction, but there are many other reasons that they might need high support, such as brain injury, mental illness, physical challenges, and we do in this building have a proposed 7 units for accessible for people with disabilities in that way. So again, our goal is to see people that we work with make healthy life choices. That is why all residents will receive individualized case planning to further develop life and social skills, such as employment planning and managing the transition to independence and recovery, as well as programming space to facilitate training and food preparation. So I'm going to ask Craig now to talk about the funding piece.
Thank you, and thank you to Council for hearing the delegation presentation. My name is Craig Crawford. I'm the Vice President of Operations at BC Housing. So with respect to the funding, BC Housing is pleased to partner with the Regional District and the municipality. Thanks for bringing the land to the table. BC Housing is bringing the entire capital cost of the project, so it'll be fully funded in terms of the capital cost. And as well, we will bring ongoing operating funding to support the society with their staffing and the meals and the all the operating costs for the project. Typically, the residents will be paying income assistance for their accommodation, and that's not enough to cover the entire operating costs. So BC Housing bridges the gap between the tenant rent contribution and the actual ongoing operating costs for the project.
So I just want to talk about Island Crisis Care Society for a few minutes. We've been operating a homeless shelter, Samaritan House, since the early 80s in Nanaimo, and we have over 60 staff, and our frontline workers are unionized. Running housing and supports for clients with mental health and addiction issues has given us a lot of experience. When we put in our application for this project, we received many letters of support from agencies that we work with in Oceanside. And we are committed to seeing people supported so that, again, they make those healthy life choices. We've been working in Parksville since 2003, when through a contract with Island Health, Mental Health and Substance Use, we opened Hearst House, a 6-bed crisis stabilization home just over the road here. The only clients that are able to come into Hearst House are those that are referred through mental health and substance use. So seeing the rise in homelessness in Oceanside and the huge need a few years ago, I got involved in the task force in 2012. And we as a group have been working towards a solution since then. And actually, they were even doing it way before me, but I got involved in 2012. Through the task force, we started the Housing First project, and since the Homelessness Outreach Support Team and collaboratively with agencies working together, we have been able to house approximately 50 people. Now, some of these are ones who need ongoing support, and we support them with 7 days a week support through outreach workers, with Island Crisis Care Society providing the weekend coverage, which is money that we raise through the coldest night of the year. And then the next point that I want to make is that there's been a lot of talk about the shelter in this project, but realistically, it is a very small piece. There's been a shelter in Parksville for 7 years. The first few years, the Salvation Army ran the extreme weather shelter out of their downtown church. But when they were no longer able to do it, Island Crisis Care stepped up and took it over. But our challenge every year is to find a location for that shelter. This past winter, the Arbutus Grove Church, which is on Legion property, allowed us to use their multi-purpose room. But it's only one room, and it's difficult to have men and women together, and there are no shower facilities in that building. So BC Housing is committed to porting the current funding for the winter shelter, which is from November 1st to March 31st, over to the new building. And this is 8 beds, and the building being purpose-built, it will be great because we'll be able to keep one room specifically for women for their safety. So I would like to close by sharing a message that was sent to me this weekend. This gentleman tells me that he has accessed mental health services for 45 of his 50 years. And while he has housing, he has a good friend that lives in Coombs in a trailer with no toilet and no electricity. He then goes on to say, and I quote, "Thanks so much for your contribution to the community. I feel that people like you are important allies for people like me. In my mind, this project is about inclusion and a vital part of community building, as important as senior centers or playgrounds." Thank you very much.
Okay. I'm now going to go to members of council. Members of council, I'm going to approach each one of you individually. I'm going to go around the table. I'm going to start on my right-hand side. And I'm going to ask members of council to start off with 2 questions each, and then we can come back around again. I'm sure that everybody's got more than 2 questions. I know I do. So, Councillor Burden, would you start us off, please?
Thank you. I've spoken to an awful lot of people over the past several weeks, a mix of professionals, residents, people opposed to the project, people in favor of the project. And most of the opposition that I've heard revolves around drug use and the fear associated with drug users. When I listened to them express their fear, they weren't talking about ignoring the plight of people who have found themselves to be without a home. They were talking about fear of drug use and the consequences that come to the community around that. I've also seen a lot of misinformation. I've seen a campaign of misinformation around the proposed service model. This facility has been labeled by some as a wet house. And my question is, can you please speak to that, as I am really unwilling to support the enabling of addiction?
So, as mentioned, our main goal is to provide supports for people to help them overcome challenges that they have in their life. We will not discriminate against people for challenges, but we will definitely look at a healthy mix in the building. We are not interested in having a building that we can't control. It just wouldn't be reasonable. So as we have this team that comes together to look at who's going to be going into the housing, that will be one of the pieces that will be looked at. You know, it would not be in our best interest. We have a staff that we have to protect. We have a building that we have to protect, and we also have neighbors that we definitely want to protect. So we will not be looking at trying to fill it with people that we won't be able to work with. So do you want to add on to that?
So,
Okay, all right. I don't want any comments because we can't hear what the answers are going to be, and you need to hear the answers like we do. So please refrain from comments.
So in response to the issue around enabling, the first and foremost, the objective of this housing is to take people who are homeless and get them housed. And our learning is that once people have a safe, secure place to live, it gives them a platform upon which they can then deal with the other challenges in their life. And so that's really objective. People will, there will be some people living in this building that will choose to use drugs. There will not be a we won't prohibit, the operator will not do body searches or otherwise try and prevent people from using drugs in the building. There will be case management and encouragement and support to deal with their addictions of whatever substance they may be dealing with. But they do have their own the right to live in their building and make their own choices. So that's the balance that is to be struck in this housing. It's not allowing it or prohibiting it. There's obviously laws in this country that people need to abide by, but the operator is not the policeman in this, so that's not their role.
You'll have a follow-up, Councillor Burden?
So what's your process for it's not a safe injection site, and what's your process for dealing with people who are showing signs that they have no interest in pursuing sobriety?
Well, as I mentioned, it's the housing first, premise. So as to whether they choose to continue drinking or whatever, we will continue to work with them and try and encourage them. It's going to be based on behavior. There will be an agreement that they will sign, a resident agreement, and if they do not follow through on any of those things, if they're abusive, if they're in public doing something that's inappropriate, we will be removing them because that is not acceptable behavior.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, this is too short. Sorry. Thank you for your presentation. So my question is, if you have folks in there who are using, and I think that is a big concern for a lot of folks in our community, and I think it's a valid concern. So knowing, and at the same time, and I've said this before, I also recognize that in any apartment building in our downtown right now, there's somebody right now using. You just don't know because you're not in their apartment with them. But it's happening. It's happening in houses. It's happening at your neighbor's house. It's happening. So thinking that this is the only house in town where people are going to be using is, well, you're dreaming. It's not. Having said that, though, when you recognize, I'm not sure who the people in that building are. Like, what is their role? If someone is using, and so you stated you're going to be discussing alternatives to using, moving forward, becoming independent, what do you have in place? Is there a facility that you will be recommending? Will there be bus tickets to get there? How are you going to get them to the treatment center right now? Because that's when they want to go right now. Do you have that as part of the process, or is it just whatever happens?
So we have the team. We're already working with the Homelessness Outreach Support Team, and that includes mental health and addiction workers that work with us very closely with these clients. And so that continuing the fact that this building will have an office where that team will be able to be, and it will be easy for the people to come down and chat, and we'll be able to make those referrals and get them moving forward when they want to go for treatment. They won't be scared that when they go, they're going to lose their housing, because we're going to keep that place for them, so that then when they come back, we can then continue to support them so that they are then successful.
Thank you. And I do have a follow-up. And I do want to say, I do understand with maintaining the housing while they're gone. I just understand that whole process through the ministry. The other question I have is, there's been some concern that when folks are using, and so the concern is this, you know they're using, they're in the house, the drugs are illegal, so we're not allowed to use heroin. However, the police aren't going to do anything because they know people are in there using heroin. That seems to be a problem. That seems to be an issue with folks, is how come it's okay for those guys to be in that house using, but it's not okay for somebody to be somewhere else using, that because you know. The difference being because you know. Because we don't know in our apartment next door to us, we don't know that they're using. But because you know that people are using, how is that acceptable, or even is it acceptable? I don't know. I don't know the answer to this, but they're feeling. So the question is, will the police be involved with that, and would there be charges, or would there be possession, or would it just be okay that they carry on, or would there be an introduction to methadone or Suboxone? What would that look like?
So, I mean, definitely it's based on behavior, and that's what we're trying to say, is that in our experience and in Housing First across the world, we are seeing that people do decide. I mean, no one wakes up, as a little child and, I think I'd like to be addicted to drugs. Like, people want to get well. And we want to care for those people so that they have that ability and support them, so that when they're having a bad day, they might consider coming down and chatting with the worker who's on 24/7 instead of using. So
Please, I'm going to have to ask you once again to listen to the answers, because when you're listening, you're learning.
This is not something new. We're working with these clients all the time. In Samaritan House, it's a low-barrier shelter, and we have supportive units in there. I can tell you that the success rate is huge because it's that support, it's that community that helps people want to get better. So we don't condone illegal behavior. I mean, I personally would not want anyone to use drugs, of course not. But we do want to see people get well. And you can't just say to someone, hey, get better. It takes a process, and that's what we want to support. We want to see healthy people. Do you want to add?
Okay, Councillor, you've had your two questions, so Councillor Beale will move on. I'll come back. Councillor Beale. No questions from the audience. Sorry, this is what you elect councillors for.
Yeah.
Councillor Beale.
Okay. I'd like to shift to a different aspect of this. I too, as excuse me, thank you. I too have been getting a lot of information from various sources, and some of it does seem to be misinformation, and there seem to be certain themes, certain concerns that come forth. And I realize that your presentation tonight has spoken about how the facility would be run, as well as how it would be funded, and also the mix and the inclusion and so on that would be in place. I'm wondering about sort of the exterior and the impact on the neighboring community, and I'm wondering how you see fostering let's say, pride of place, pride of this will be a brand new building. From what I can see, although it wasn't a color version, you know, if this does move ahead, it could be an asset to our community. And I'm just wondering how, if there has been experience with BC Housing to ensure that aesthetically, both for the people who live there as well as the neighbors, how is this looked after and encouraged? And I don't know that money's not endless, and so what might be needed from the larger community in order to assure that this would be a very attractive, welcoming addition to the neighborhood and to the city.
Well, certainly the operating budget will include sufficient funding for regular maintenance and landscaping, and as well, what BC Housing has seen other operators do is have some stipends for some of the residents so that they can do some maintenance and general cleanup in the area, and that's been very successful. So there's lots of examples of this type of housing elsewhere on the island and the rest of the province, and we believe it's important to have a good appearance to the building, so we pay attention to that, and as BC Housing is a funder, if we become aware of any concerns, we'll certainly address those with the nonprofit society.
And thank you. And Craig, you did mention something that's another question that I have, because I have been, in addition to reading the information that's been coming forth from our own community, I have been attempting to do additional research on communities elsewhere that have had variations on this. And I'm wondering if there are, I've looked at a few, but how easy is it to find other examples? Because from what I've read so far, concerns about policing and the like have not necessarily been validated over time. And I wonder if you can either share some stats on that or advise us as to where else we can look for further information.
Yes, we have developed, we've got supportive housing case studies on BC Housing's website, and they're available to download. It identifies properties in Vancouver, Surrey, Abbotsford, Victoria, and Kelowna, and it speaks to the police calls before and after one of the projects are built, and the police calls go down, so the community is safer after the project is built. And there's a study available on property values as well, indicating no impact on property values.
Just a note for everybody in the audience, Violet Hayes is in the community. If you've got questions after tonight, you can always contact her or contact anybody on the Oceanside Homelessness Task Force. Councillor Oates.
Thank you, Worship. There's been an awful lot of concerns that have been raised, and I believe all the concerns that have been raised are legitimate in their own right. And I think that we as a council, it behooves us to listen to those concerns and try to address those concerns. One of the biggest concerns that I have, and this is just my interpretation of what I'm hearing, and it sort of hinges on what Councillor Birding was saying about enabling poor behavior or enabling addictions and things like that. And that is the shelter component of the facility. And I think there's a fear there that the transient nature of what a shelter-type facility provides encourages people that are probably not from the area to be here more so than they would be here. So I'm wondering if the shelter component of it is integral to the final plan. Could that be not be part of the final plan? Because I think that the people of Parksville and the regional district are compassionate and do want to provide housing, and they have a lot of pride and sense of ownership and love for the community. I think that's evident by the people that are here tonight, and I think that it's when you see what's going on in our community, because the level of crime is rising. I forgot to lock my car and lost my motorcycle helmet just the other night, which was $325. So for sure there's people going around checking there, and we don't want to encourage those kinds of people into our community. So does
with the applause, you get a chance to.
Yeah, but I don't want you to misinterpret what I'm saying, that the people that you're planning on helping are those same people that are going around, because I don't for a minute believe that they are the same people. However, I do believe that an opportunity exists when you provide a transient type temporary shelter. I don't want to be part of a refueling station for some criminals and enabling poor behavior. So if that's what it took to turn the deal, could it operate without a shelter?
I mean, it definitely could, but I don't know what BC Housing...
So the project could operate without a shelter, yes.
But what I would like to say is for 7 years we've had that shelter here in Parksville, and every year, as I mentioned, we are struggling to try and find a place to run that shelter. So it would be a huge loss if we then didn't have a location and would be scrambling again trying to find a location for the shelter.
And if I may add, the notion that a shelter would attract people from outside of the Oceanside area, I would not be able to provide any evidence to that effect. Our experience in other communities is that we have shelters, we fund shelters in a number of communities across the province, and there are some individuals that tend to cycle in and out of the shelters, but they still are from the immediate area. And certainly the homeless population that we're intending to serve with the nonprofit society here is from the Oceanside area.
Okay, so there's two extremes that we're faced with here as council. One is the ability to do something for people very less fortunate than us in our community. And then there's the other extreme, which says that if we do something like this, we're selling out our tourist town. Any comments on that?
Go ahead. As mayor, I haven't heard anybody from the Tourism Association complaining about it, but
I would just make the comment that you currently have homeless people in your community. I'd put forth that tourists and residents alike from this community would find the community to be a better place if those people that are currently homeless now are safely housed.
Well, if we don't do anything, does the problem go away?
No, it'll get worse.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for being in the hot seat this evening. As the one business person on this council who has a business in the downtown core, I'm very familiar with the homeless aspect, with the drag and transient aspect that is in our community. But yesterday I went to Vancouver and came back today as well. So I'm looking at a community that has 12,500 or so people, 40,000 surrounding, and it's no different that you have people panhandling here as you do in Vancouver or anywhere else. I met with a longtime friend and had a lot of questions with her. She is the executive director for Alouette Addictions. And she asked a lot of questions about me and about this facility, and I said I wasn't able to answer them all. And I think that's the problem per se, is that we're so uncertain of what this looks like. When I've been on council and I've looked at the homeless task force and that in the past, my priorities and everything always were homelessness, single parents. This facility doesn't have any suites, any rooms or anything available for families, for single parents. So that's my biggest concern. I don't know if you want to touch on it or not.
It's not an either or. BC Housing has certainly recently been given an opportunity to provide funding for a range of housing options. This particular project and the funding program for this one is definitely studio units targeting a homeless and homeless at risk population. There is an opportunity for this and other communities in the province to respond to a proposal call for affordable housing for families and seniors as well. So it's not an either or.
But why couldn't it have been?
The first tranche of funding that we were given by the government was to provide a rapid response to an urgent need, and that urgent need was identified as the homeless at risk population, quickly followed by the opportunity to develop some affordable housing for families as well.
So one of the questions that I was asked, and that was the Vulnerability Assessment Tool, or VAT, and the service levels of what they have different degrees of what is required or what service levels and that. So is this facility going to have the highest level of vulnerability? Is that the 20% that I find in my...
The homeless population that's going to be served in this building, if it's approved, is the current homeless population in this area. So what the vulnerability assessment tool will do is identify the kinds of vulnerabilities that population has and make sure that the staff at the property and the other supports, including the health authority, are aware of those vulnerabilities and then can have an individual case management for each of those. And the objective of having service levels is to really signal to the nonprofit society that we want a mix of tenants in the building. But primarily the tool of the vulnerability assessment tool, its purpose really is to surface the support needs of the individuals.
Do I get my one moment? Okay, so we touched a little bit about, well, we've touched a lot on mental health and that there's staffing and everything involved and that. but how much staff actually is there? When we look at the partnerships and everything that this project has come before, I'm not really seeing that VIHA specifically is there per se. We do have mental health aspects, but I don't know if there's a nurse practitioner, that there's healthcare supports and services. I don't know if there's a peer mentorship. I don't know if there's who's providing meals. Is there a contracted service provider?
Yeah, and it's really early right now for us to say any of that. Yep.
So to answer your question specifically, for this size of project, BC Housing has developed a standardized staffing model, which we haven't finalized, obviously, with this nonprofit society, but it would allow for 2 staff 24/7. It would have a building manager. It would have somebody responsible for maintenance, and it would have somebody responsible for the meal program. In addition to that, so that would be the staff complement at the building. So 2 staff 24/7, plus a day manager, plus a maintenance person, plus somebody to be responsible for the meal program. Then in addition, the health supports are really the community-based health supports, but will be targeted for the building. And as was mentioned, there's an office space to accommodate the community health services if they want to and are able to provide services in the building.
And I just want to add that we're already working with that team, and that will just continue as they now will have a place to be, because at the moment we're all over the place because we don't have an office together. So now it's not as convenient. And so, but I mean, as far as like who's going to be doing the workability kind of stuff, we've had all sorts of discussions with different organizations that we're hoping will come together. And that's just extra on top of what is already committed from BC Housing.
Okay, members of council, I'm going to go around the table once again. Any further questions? Councillor Burton, do you have any further questions? Councillor Salter, do you have any further questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do I get 4? It's not that I wasn't keeping count. I was keeping count. So here's my thoughts on this. If I were on the other side of this desk listening to your responses now, and before I say this, I'm going to just lay this out. I do support supportive housing. My other job, I work at the ministry, and I'm a drug and alcohol worker. So I understand what we're talking about with regard to supportive housing. I get it. But having said that, though, just because I do doesn't make my opinion right. So it really is important, I think, to establish that the concerns that are raised by the citizens, that's part of this democratic process, and they're inherently good. So we really have to, I feel, in order to maintain the fabric of this community, to keep it from being damaged, which I think is happening right now, just because, and I think it's a lack of information which is causing it, or maybe not. But I feel that myself. When I'm hearing the answers, what I'm hearing is, well, it's early days, we haven't got that down yet, we're working on that. That's when you are feeling fearful, or there's this frustration or divisiveness that's happening within the community, they need more than that. They need to hear, this is what it's going to look like, and this is what we're going to do if things go south, and this is what we're going to, and I'm not hearing that either. And so I don't think this is substantial enough to assist the community to say, oh, okay, I'm good with this, because I don't think they're hearing the final answer. I know about BC Housing. I know we've got a Macola housing facility here in Parksville for single parents. So that is being addressed as well as it can at this time in the community. So I understand that this one is for single people. But I just think that we need more substantial information in order to make this decision, and so do the community. And I also think that any project or any plan can be tweaked. It can be changed. It can be tweaked to make it better, tweaked to make it a little more palatable. That can be done. So it isn't that this has to be, hard-baked and that's it. So I think we have to come at it from that perspective that, yes, this doesn't have to be one particular way. But I think as far as the community is involved, I believe it's their safety that they're concerned with, their children. Can I walk by that house and it's going to be okay, or am I going to be, accosted, or is someone going to be rolling around? Those are things that people are concerned about, and so that's what they need to. That's what we all need to hear. And as councillors and mayor, the community has to continue to be as safe as it is today. And so that's our job, to make sure it is such. So how do we mitigate this if it doesn't go well? How do we mitigate that? Will there be more funding? Will we change up how we're delivering services? Personally, I think there should be more than a maintenance man and a food person in that building. I think if we've got people that are in there that may be acting out, maybe violent, maybe whatever, the behavior that occurs sometimes with use of any substances, why not a facilitator on site? Why not a facilitator on site? Why not someone that is actually there 24/7? Give them an apartment for free, and it's their job to ensure that folks are okay, that folks are calm, that they have someone to go to. I just feel like whatever. I feel like breaking a window right now. I think I'll go talk to Bob, because Bob's in 401. It's just something. I think more than what's being proposed. In that building. I think there needs to be more checks and balances for what that's going to look like.
Okay, so there are 2 staff support workers 24/7. So that's all the time. And then on top of that is the manager, who's Monday to Friday, and then the maintenance person, and then the cook. And then there'll also be all the other organizations that will be working in that room, in that office, to support and do those, case planning and outreach for if the person is wanting to go for treatment, all those kind of things. That's on top of. So, and then with the shelter, if the shelter is open, there'll be another 2 staff at all time on with the shelter. So it is well staffed. It really is.
Okay. Councillor Beal, do you want to ask another question?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did hear earlier that the task force has, in fact, the outreach group has, in fact, housed 50 people over the past 3 years, so has been success with that. Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Will there also be opportunities with the plan right now? I have 2 questions. I hope that's all right. For, community involvement as well, if, to get involved, to assist and take part?
Absolutely. We're hoping that we will have a group from the neighborhood that will work with us, especially when we're starting to set the place up. We want to have a group of community people that work with the staff, and then as issues come up, that we can then address them very quickly. There'll be, as I mentioned, there's always going to be 2 people on site, so there'll be a phone number that the neighbors can have. They'll be able to phone at any time, night or day, and say, I have a concern, I have an issue, something's happening, and that staff member will be there to address it.
Okay, and my question is perhaps actually addressed to Mr. Russell, just to clarify, because there were some questions about, is this enough detail? But this is a rezoning, this is information before a rezoning application. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there would also still be a development permit application. Is that correct, Mr. Russell?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Beal, yes, the property is in a development permit area, so a development permit would also be required.
Okay. So would it be typical, I mean, just thinking, because I really am trying to think about this as this is a rezoning application, and I do realize that it's for a demographic, an identified demographic that perhaps we don't presently have housing for, but we certainly do have a number of assisted living facilities in our community, and I'm just wondering, and again, perhaps Mr. Russell can help me out here, but would it be typical to have, you know, every last detail about how the place is run at a rezoning step, or would some of that come later with a development permit?
If I may, Worship, through to Councillor Beal, the development permit looks essentially at the layout of the site, the landscaping of the site, the architectural particulars of the site, and whether or not the specific proposal meets the guidelines of the development permit area.
Councillors have asked most of the questions I was going to ask, but I do have two. Can we see a copy of the agreement that you'd signed with the tenant? Can that be put out for public notice? For example, could it be published in the newspaper to see what it looks like? Is that violating any confidence?
None that I can think of.
Okay.
So
My other question is, and I've had a few folk come and see me about this, they're concerned about the level of crime and the value of their homes that are near this area. Would you care to comment on that?
The statistics that we have, and some of them are on our website, is the crime goes down once one of these projects is built, and there is no effect on property values.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Oates.
This is more of a question through to our staff. Procedurally, for this project to proceed, it has to go through this zoning process and be approved, and then it will go through the development permit stage, and that also will require council approval. Are there any other opportunities for council to vote on this project other than those two opportunities?
If I may, Worship, through the rezoning process, Council has a number of opportunities to vote at each step that the rezoning application works its way through the process. And the sorry, make sure this card's. Sorry, let me repeat this here. At each step through the rezoning process where the bylaw goes for readings, Council has an opportunity to ask questions and to consider the application and make decisions, as well as at the development permit application stage, Council also has an opportunity to make decisions.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Oates, I'd also like to mention that there is a number of other processes, such as the disposition of the land, that Council does notice for and then also makes a decision on. And another item with respect to the housing agreement with the operator, if they are successful in getting a rezoning. Another process with respect to the lease for the land, where the City Council would be making a decision in that regard on the provisions of that lease. And there's also a housing agreement with respect to development cost charges and rent, affordable rent. So those items will also come if the rezoning is successful.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Patterson, we're getting down to the, I think we'll, you got more? I'll come back to you, Councillor Patterson, I'll come back.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, just so I'm clear, because I've been a landlord, and the Rental Tenancy Act generally requires 72-hour notice to enter into a premises. Now, will that be in effect, or will there be some other form of commitment?
It's the program agreement that they sign, so it's not the Tenancy Act. So it gives us a much stronger ability to move the person out if they don't follow the rules.
How long a time period?
Oh, right away.
Is there a curfew involved in part of the tenancy agreement?
Pardon me?
Is there a curfew or anything involved with the tenancy agreement?
I don't know that. No? Okay.
Could there be?
No, we wouldn't support a curfew.
I have one other question, and I'm not sure if you're able to answer it. So this is a little bit tough, and not for me. So it's in regards to Narcan stats. Do you have them? Do you have that, if you know that we've had any overdoses or deaths, or do our ambulances carry Narcan and that on them? And how much has that been? Do we know the stats for our Oceanside area?
Health would have that.
So that brings back one of my first questions about the partnership with VIHA and everything too.
I can tell you that all our staff are trained in it, and at Samaritan House we haven't had an incident where they've had to use it. And so that's a high-risk population, and we've never used a kit, and nor here at the weather shelter either. So, yeah.
Thank you. We do, I think that our community has had concerns with needles, and that's very much so in the community. I brought on the table and everything today that I'm a diabetic. I have needles. I have probably about 8 of them a day, and that never will you see one in my residence outside of my bedroom. Never will you see them in the garbage can or anything at my business, and that. But how do we help support that we do not have needles throughout our community?
Well, I think it's the continuing work of trying to make sure that there are the sharps containers are used, and definitely the group that we will have that will be cleaning up around the area will take pride in their area and want to make sure that it's clean. I think we all hope for that, and it is an ongoing challenge and that all communities are facing, and we work towards trying to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Councillor Burton.
I echo the sentiments around the amount of information, and you and I have discussed this, the amount of information that's been able to get into the public forum. And I guess my question is really through to staff. You piqued my interest with the number of times that we're going to be asked for approvals, and I'm wondering if things like service agreements can be included in some of those steps going forward, just to provide, I guess, a greater sense of security.
Mrs. Keller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Burton, could you specify a little bit more detail on servicing agreements between the city and the operator? Is that what you mean?
The operator is going to have a service agreement with BC Housing, I assume, and they're also going to have an agreement with each one of their tenants. And I'm wondering if those agreements can be part of our lease agreement with, I guess, with BC Housing, just as some assurance that things are going to be the way that they have been stated to be. And I'm still anxiously waiting to see those things.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Burton, staff would take direction from council on what the provisions would be in the lease agreement. We would probably have our solicitors review any final drafts, of course, but we typically, with any of the tenants that we have, we take direction from council on what those provisions would be, and it's similar to a contract where we obviously, if it's within the law and the delegation of authority that council has, we can include anything that council wishes to see, and it would be an agreement between the two parties as to, the final look of that agreement.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple things. One is, so when people are acting out, they're violent or whatever it is, they've disregarded their agreement, they're going to be removed. And removed to where?
That's the challenge. Yeah. It's a challenge. I mean,
So not, and this isn't to get people worked up either, because first of all, what I want to say to everybody who's listening, they're already out there now. They're not in the house, they're on the street right now. So it's not that they're not it's not that they're not living around here, they're here. Yeah. So my thought though is they really shouldn't be on the street or in the house, but then where do they go when they do act out? We don't want them back on the street. Where do they go? That's something that may be considered to be added to the proposal, so that something's in place for that when it happens. The other thing I want to say is two things. One is my feeling from listening to all of this, and not just tonight, because it's been going on for a while, and we've been getting a lot of feedback, good feedback, and we've been getting feedback, I guess. It shouldn't be good or bad, it is what it is. But my thought is this: I don't want to make this decision. I don't want to be the person that has to make a decision on what this house is going to look like or not going to look like, or whether it should be there or shouldn't be there, because it isn't really my decision to make. I just got elected here. So I'm just elected to speak on behalf of the community. What I would like to see, I think what I would like to do is make a motion that rather than go to a public forum, that we put this on as a referendum on the next ballot.
Are you making that motion?
I'm making that motion.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Discussion on the motion.
I'd like to speak to that.
You could speak to it, you're the mover.
And so the reason being that I don't want to be carrying this one myself. I think the community need to carry it. It's their community. And I also think that the decision will be made then by all voters, not by a group who absolutely support it or a group that absolutely disagree with it. It will be all voters that are at that ballot box making that decision. Hopefully it'll be informed, but it will be their decision, and in the end, that's what we will go with. And the last thing I want to say, though, is that we all keep in mind something that Gandhi said, which was the true integrity of a community is reflected in how we treat our most vulnerable.
Okay, any further comments? Councillor Oates.
On the motion for a referendum, I'm going to speak against it. There is a referendum coming up. It's the election. Should this council make a decision that the community disagrees with? Should this council make a decision that the community disagrees with, they'll have the opportunity to voice that in the next election. We were elected. I got all night.
Parcel's voting in the town.
That's good. We were elected to make decisions on behalf of the people of Parksville.
I'm going to have to ask you to be quiet so we can listen to everybody talk.
I believe that there were some legitimate concerns that were brought up here tonight, and I don't for a minute support the notion that we're doing this in secrecy. I asked a question earlier. It's not done yet. I asked a question earlier if what opportunities we would have to vote on this project going forward. It was indicated to me that there would be multiple opportunities for us to be voting on different aspects that would either make this project go forward or stall it. Earlier this year, when there was a lot less people in the gallery than is here tonight, Councillor Burden brought forward the notion about, and the council supported it, the notion about when we have big ticket items, maybe that should be a single agenda item for that particular item, for that particular issue. So while I won't support a referendum on this issue, I will support widening the opportunity for the public to be involved in all the processes that are going forward. And if that means having a public open forum like this for every single one of them, absolutely I'll go for it. But as far as the referendum is concerned, I'm prepared to make a decision after the people have given me the input that I'm sure they'll have the opportunity to give to me if we provide them the opportunity. The two speakers that spoke earlier tonight against this gave the notion that there was some notion of secrecy, and they asked for question and answer period with the entire community. I think that as we debate these different aspects going forward, the zoning, the development permit, and any other aspects that would require council approval, that would be the opportunity for us as a council and Parksville as a community to better understand the issue. So to simply put it to a referendum now, I think is an abandonment of what we were elected to do, and I'd prefer to do the process that has worked so well for so long, to open up to the public, to allow them to give input to council as we're going forward. So while that would be convenient and popular and politically, I guess, no. Hey, listen, I got a text earlier tonight. Said all I had to do was vote this down and I could be mayor. So, for me, this is not a decision about my political future. This is a decision about the future of the community of Parksville. And that decision, and that decision will be based on a careful analytical examination of the empirical facts. It won't be based on the social media campaign. It won't be based on signs. It won't be based on people shouting and jeering. It'll be based on the facts. That's what I committed when I got elected, and that's what I intend to do.
Any other comments? You're going to have to wait. You've had your chance. Any other further comments from members of council? I'll come back to you. Councillor Beale.
Thank you. And I would not be in favor of a referendum. And for a number of reasons. And first and foremost, we actually do have a process here that allows for additional input. If the first steps, if there's a first and second reading, and I know it seems odd, and it took me a while to get my head around, like, okay, you go first, second, but then we can move to a public hearing. And I know that the plan is that should it go to that point, we will in fact be booking the Community and Civic Conference Center so that there is additional space to get as many people as can come. We also do read each and every letter that comes through. And I'm sure, like myself, I am sure that councillors and staff are gathering information. I certainly do research on what else has been out there, what are the findings, speak with our local RCMP, speak with other people. I need to be informed, but I do feel that that is my responsibility to do that research. And so, whatever group is here, I do appreciate the concerns. I totally understand that there would be concerns and worries that something might bring a change that is negative, but it also might not, and it also might end up bringing additional positives. So I think we really need to do our homework. Do we need a referendum for that? No, we don't. No, we don't. Furthermore, I do believe that it would prolong this process, and we have people out there who need the answers sooner, not later. People need that. We will have, if we move forward, once again, we will have a public hearing. I've been told that we can go till midnight or 2 a.m. if need be. And we do, again, we not only collect all of the letters, the emails, as well as take the information that comes forth and it's recorded. That information is also shared with BC Housing, and it's all considered. There certainly are common themes. Some of the information that comes forward is backed up by evidence, research of other places. Some of it, I think, speaks to people's worries, and I think those worries are really legitimate. I think it's really important. Something we haven't asked here tonight is, okay, I mean, there are overlapping concerns here. I think it's worth keeping in mind that this proposal is for a mix of people. Most of the people who will be there, the common denominator is that they would be homeless or at risk of homelessness. Would that eliminate, even if it was the perfect setting, even if it was in another area of the community, would that eliminate all the concerns about drugs and the drug dealers and what's going on and how that impacts the neighborhood? No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. But we can't lump it all into one. I hear from people, oh, well, if it was for families or for single parents, then we would go for it. Well, it doesn't mean that we don't need that kind of housing as well. But this is about a zoning application. It's not actually, well, I won't go into all the other bits. So I do not support a referendum. I think that we can deal with it with the processes that we have before us. I do still have, and can I ask a quick question? If it turned out that the shelter was not a good, I mean, if it did move forward, if it turned out that the shelter was not deemed a good fit with the mix there, is that something that could be adjusted later on? And I know it's not the motion exactly, but I would really appreciate the answer to that question.
Councillor?
Could you repeat the question, please?
I would just like to know that if for some reason it would turned out that the shelter was not deemed by the people running the place to be a good fit with the housing, is that something that could be re-examined and adjusted?
Yes.
Councillor Burton?
So I too won't support a referendum, and you can go ahead because I've got more to say. The process that we're going through, as has been stated, allows for an awful lot of input. Believe it or not, I've had several letters, more than several, a lot of letters of support for this project. And while I have not made a commitment, doing nothing is not an option. We have a group of people in our community who are being marginalized, who are being dehumanized. I have them living in the woods behind my house, and I wouldn't want that for anybody. Doing nothing is not an option. Holding a referendum is not the answer. Going through the process that we're going through now, I've learned a lot just tonight. And I've spoken, as I said, to an awful lot of people, several of you in the room. Doing nothing is not an option. We're going to move forward with the process that we've outlined, that is the legal process for making this sort of a facility available. Whether it's exactly what's being outlined right now or not isn't the question right now. How can we move forward as a community to help those people in our community that are being marginalized, and then come together again at the end of the day as a community?
Councillor Patterson, do you want to add anything? Councillor Salter, please keep it brief because we're going to take a vote pretty soon.
Listen to me now. So what I want to say is this: zoning and permit approval processes at the municipal level have played an important function in protecting the rights and interests of individual homeowners. And taking this to referendum, I don't fear a referendum. I don't have to have a yes. I would like to have a yes. I've already played my hand. You know that I support this. But if the community does not support this in a referendum, I would accept that. And I guess we would go back to the drawing board and come up with something that the community would accept. But I don't fear taking it to referendum. I don't believe a referendum is doing nothing. I think everyone who votes has something to do, and that's to make a decision. And it also means that they need to inform themselves. They have access to the people who know what's going on. As far as time frames, we're talking 4 months. These guys have been on the street for years. What's 4 months? There are already services in the community that are assisting, excuse me, Councillor, please, I'm speaking.
Okay, finish
there are
up,
already
please.
There are already services in this community that are assisting people who are on the streets at the moment. They're already there. It's been going on now for years. So when we're talking, this is a time frame, we've got to get it done. No, we don't. Let's back it up. Let's slow it down and let everybody... And let everybody make that decision, because the decision isn't for us to just to ram through. It is to listen to people, to let them decide, and to go from there. Not for us to be pushing it. I know what we want. I do. I know what we're hoping for. But forcing what we want is not democratic.
Councillor Burden, I'm going to let you speak, and then I'm going to speak, and we're going to call the vote.
Okay. So I don't believe anything is being rammed through. I don't believe anything is being hurried along. We just heard a series of steps that are going to take several months to get through. We can't hold a public hearing until sometime next month. Then there's a statutory process after that where we gather more information or digest the information that we've received. I am continuing on my fact-finding, and I will continue until I have the answers that I need, and that includes speaking to people who are both supportive and opposed to this project. I don't believe we need a referendum. I think that we need to work together to find a solution to homelessness that's going to work in our community based on some of the parameters that have been outlined by BC Housing.
Really?
Ask a couple of questions.
Well, keep it really short, because I want to call the vote.
How quickly could... I don't care. So, no one said, I never said, don't put words in my mouth. I never said I made up my mind. I don't know what anybody else said, but I never said I made up my mind.
I'm going to ask the audience
I have a
to be
question for
quiet.
staff. How quickly could we hold a referendum?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Oates, I'm not sure of the legislative timelines. We'd have to check, but it would be, if we were going to be doing that, we would need a decision extremely quickly to get it on the general election, but we can hold a referendum outside of a general election cycle. We would just have to set up a process similar to a by-election for that, so we would basically be able to do it.
So we couldn't hold a referendum in advance of the election?
I don't believe we have the staff capacity to do that with a general election coming on October 20th. I would have to look into some options. It would require hiring a consultant to do that, I believe.
Thank you.
I'm not going to support a referendum. I'm not going to support a referendum simply because poverty is on the rise in Parksville. I've lived in Parksville for 21 years. Poverty is on the rise, and from where I sit in the mayoral chair, I can tell you as we speak that there are a lot of people, they're not all here tonight, there are a lot of people who don't want to see this project stopped. They want to see this project go on. And I think that the longer we allow people to participate, the social media people are not going to change their mind. Their minds have made up. They don't want this building. That's a fact. So there's nothing that anybody can say or do or whatever that's going to get them to consider doing something about poverty and doing something about homelessness. So I want to hear. I'm not going to support the referendum. I want to hear from the public at large. And on that note, we're going to take the vote. All those in favor of the motion to hold a referendum. That motion is defeated. Okay, I'm going to thank you very much. There's no questions. I'm sorry. You can talk to us, talk to the panel of presenters. You can talk to us offline. Come and see me any day of the week. Okay. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for the information. Now, I want to give the audience an opportunity here. We're going to go into regular business, which is kind of boring. And we've got 3 items on regular business. I don't know how long that's going to take. What I could do, with the direction from staff, what I could do is I could hold the voting on the 2 readings and advance to public hearing. I could do that right now, so that when that vote is over, unless you want to stay for the boring stuff in terms of running the city, you can stay.
Mr. Mayor, if we could get a motion to that effect to amend the agenda to bring that item forward, then we can consider it now.
Could I have a motion then to move up 6A to this particular point?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Beale. Discussion. All those in favor? That passes. Okay. So here is the. I'm going to read out the motion. There's two recommendations that the Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2018 number 200116 be read a first and second time, and that Zoning Amendment Development and Amendment Bylaw 2018 number 200116 be advanced to a public hearing to be held on a date to be determined at the Parcel Community and Conference Center located at 132 Jensen Avenue East. Discussion? All those, okay. Seconded by Councillor Beale. Discussion?
As I stated earlier, I think it's important that we move this thing through its processes, and that the public hearing is the moment when not just 1 or 2 or 3 people get to come to the microphone here, but everybody in the room gets to come to the microphone and state their case. I will be supporting that.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, can we get a date for the public hearing before council?
Does anybody? We've got some tentative reservations made at the Parcel Community and Conference Center. Does anybody want to make a motion about the potential date? Okay. Well, let's vote on the 2 recommendations, and we'll come back to the date. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Now we need to determine a date for the public hearing, and I'll give you three options, Council. June the 11th, June the 13th, or June the 19th. What's your pleasure? June the 11th, June the 13th, or June the 19th? This would be in the evening, of course, and there's no voting at this. This is a public hearing. So,
I'm not available June 19th.
Okay. I know that Councillor Powell has advised me that she's available on any of these 3 dates. June 11th, June 13th, and June 19th.
I am not available the 11th or the 13th.
Pardon me?
I am not available the 11th or the 13th.
But there's no voting, so it's just a public hearing. Okay, we'll let council decide. Does somebody want to make a recommendation on one of those dates?
Yeah, I'd like to move that we hold the public hearing on June the 19th.
I have a seconder for that.
Oh, sorry, hang on. Was that a not available? You're not available?
Somebody's not going to be available on one of those nights.
You're not available on the 13th or the 11th?
And Councillor Beale's not available on the 19th. Mrs. Caleb.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, we were trying to coordinate the room bookings with the PCCC so that we have sufficient space for a large crowd, which is expected. Trying to coordinate the schedules of all of the councillors and the availability of PCCC, we were only able to find the 11th, the 13th, and the 19th if council wishes to hold the public hearing in June. We could look for another venue, although it's limited in terms
I
of
don't
the
think
space.
there's a venue big, and I think the Chrysler Theater is what we need. So look at council, we're going to have to make a decision.
Well, what if we hold it in when are you back?
Councillor Burden, it's not that I'm back, it's that my business requires me that I have.
Okay. Can we look at July?
Problem with July is there's a lot of people on holidays. Schools are.
No.
Councillor Beal says that she can follow. Okay. 19th?
All right.
Okay, the motion is for the 19th. Who made that motion? Councillor Burton made the motion. Do I have a seconder for the 19th? Councillor Oates? All those in favor? Thank you. It's on the 19th of June. So, folks, if you're welcome to stay, but it's going to be boring from here on in.
You guys promised me.
I know.
Oh, well.
Okay, members of council, we're going to reconvene and go back to the meeting. And we are now on page... We're now on to reports. And the first report is from the fire chief, Chief Norris, who spells his first name the proper way. Automatic response agreement. I need a mover and a seconder for the two recommendations. Moved by Councillor Beal, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Okay, Chief Norris, you have the floor. Give us the background, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report regarding the renewal of the automatic response agreement is in regards to an agreement we've had for 10 years now with neighboring RDN fire departments and the town of Qualicum Beach. It's an extension of the mutual aid agreement, which allows us to call upon resources automatically, as identified by the plan, when we need them, when they're identified by our dispatchers as necessary. So it enables a small fire department to access neighboring resources quickly, and hopefully that gives us the resources necessary to mitigate emergencies in town. One recent example of an incident that the size that we're talking about would be the Ocean Terrace apartment fire last July. So we're recommending that we renew this agreement. The agreement is actually being renewed slightly ahead of schedule because 2 additional fire departments are signing on to the agreement. One other thing I would like to address is that there is the schedules in the back of the agreement appear to be not complete, and that's because they are operational in nature and are actually going around currently between the fire chiefs who are addressing the updating of those schedules. So those are operational. The actual agreement itself is the policy bit.
God, I can't stand it. It's so quiet all of a sudden. Okay, any questions for Chief Norris from members of council? Seeing none, I have a mover and a seconder. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. All right. Now I need a mover and a... before I do that, I'm going to have to invite people to speak. So, Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding follow-up report, consideration of a development variance permit related to a proposed subdivision of 790 Sanderson Road. Mr. Russell, if you would, please.
Sure, for Mayor Worship. For council consideration this evening is whether or not to issue a development variance permit that relaxes the minimum lot depth requirements from 30 meters to 23.91 meters for proposed Lot B of the proposed 2-lot subdivision. Since council last considered this matter on March the 19th, required notice has been mailed to property owners within 50 meters of the subject property. As of 4 p.m. this afternoon, no correspondence have been received. And now it's time to provide anyone who wants to speak to the application who feels they're affected to have that opportunity.
Thank you. Is there anyone present tonight who wishes to address council regarding a proposed variance at 790 Sanderson Road? Okay. Members of council, I need a mover and a seconder for the 2 recommendations. Councillor Salter, Councillor Burton. Any questions for Mr. Russell on this? Councillor Salter.
So when we're done with this, is that it, or will it come forward again, or is this it?
If
I
I may
feel like
wish.
I look at it a lot.
Yeah, this will be the last time this application comes to council, but it will still has to be considered by the subdivision approving officer.
Next report. It is my pleasure as chair of the Audit Committee. This is the City of Parksville's 2017 financial statements. As chair of the Audit Committee, I've been asked to read aloud the following statement on behalf of KPMG LLP regarding the 2017 City of Parksville financial statements. I want to thank Councillor Salter and Councillor Oates for attending the Audit Committee meeting last week. First of all, KPMG has substantially completed the audit of the City of Parksville's financial statements. We met with the Audit Committee on Friday and reviewed our detailed findings with the committee members. We have prepared a clean, unqualified audit opinion, which indicates there are no material misstatements in the consolidated financial statements. There are no outstanding matters related to the completion of the audit other than the approval of the financial statements by council. Highlights of the 2017 fiscal year included significant progress on capital projects. $18.8 million was spent on the Public Works building, the Springwood water line, and the city's share of the ERWS water treatment plant. The annual surplus following accounting rules was $13 million for the year. The entirety of this surplus, plus an additional $5 million, was invested into capital replacement. The city's accumulated surplus or net worth at the end of 2017 was $205 million, which is comprised of $173 million investment in capital assets, monies that have already been spent, $14 million in restricted surplus, money set aside for future expenditures in capital replacement, and $17.5 million in unrestricted surplus. The unrestricted surplus represents almost a year of annual expenses, which is a financially healthy position for unanticipated contingencies and growth. Thank you to management for the assistance provided during the audit process, which was a clean process and positive results, and I'd like to add my thanks to staff for all their hard work and my thanks to council for keeping your eye on the ball. So I need a mover and a seconder for the following recommendations. That the City of Parksville audited financial statements as presented by the Director of Finance on behalf of KPMG LLP for the year ended December 31st, 2017 be received for information. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Oates. All those in favor? Thank you. And number two, that the 2017 audit financial statements be accepted as presented and approved. Councillor Salter, Councillor Oates. All those in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That went very well, by the way. Okay, we're back into bylaws. This is a zoning and development bylaw, amendment bylaw 2018, number 200114. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Oates. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Then we have a business license amendment bylaw 2018, number 1483.2. And I want to know, first of all, before I go for a mover and a seconder, is there anyone in the gallery who wishes to address council regarding the proposed amendments to the business license bylaw? Still can't stand the quiet anymore. You need these big crowds to keep you alive. Okay. The birds are back. Well, I'll read the recommendation that business amendment license amendment bylaw 2018 number 1483.2 be reconsidered and finally adopted, signed by the mayor and corporate officer and the corporate seal affixed hereto. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Burton. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. And final adoption of the final financial plan bylaw 2018-2022, number 1544. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Oates. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Another final adoption, a tax rates bylaw 2018, number 1545. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Beale. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Oates. Councillor Burton.
I looked up the 2016 rates just out of interest, and I'm pleased to say that the rates have dropped, obviously because the assessments have gone up, but nice to see something drop.
Thank you for that. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. Another final adoption, Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 2000.112. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Beale. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Another final adoption, Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 2000.114. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beale. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. And finally, the difficult one, do I have a mover and a seconder for adjournment? Moved by Councillor Beal, seconded by Councillor Burton. All those in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned.